Hello, my name is Simira Uleila. I am a researcher and media producer. I am working with Tiffin Wali on a South Asian food heritage project. Today we are Saturday the 26th of November 2022. The time is 20 to 12. The location is Redbridge, East London. I am with Ajisa Saji, who is our participant today. Thank you very much, Ajisa, for being with us. Now, we're going to start with the questions, and I'd like just to know, Ajisa, how did you come to the UK for the first time, and tell me the story of your family.
Okay, I'm Ajita Sadeeb, and I am the daughter of a migrant worker. My dad is Vishwambara Narayan, and he came to the UK late 60s, and I came from 1976. I was 6 years old when I arrived in the UK. My dad is no more, and so my dad worked for the British Naval Base in Singapore, and when Britain left Singapore, all his friends and my dad had a choice to either come to the UK or make their own decisions and go back to Kerala. Dad decided to go back to Kerala, and he built a really nice house, and I think all his money finished. So he came to the UK. That in itself was a journey. He'd went with my uncle to Bombay, where my uncle was, and then from there he'd taken Egyptian Airlines to come to the UK, and took a coach to Victoria, and then a black cab all the way from Victoria to East Ham. His mates were out working, so my dad did have to wait till quite late in the evening to be let in. So that's how he got to be here. And then he worked really hard and bought his first house, and bought my mum, my older brother and my little sister over first. And my older sister and myself, we stayed back with my grandma, my mum's mum, and then we came over a couple of years later. So then we're all united back here in the UK.
Would you have any recollections from your dad of his time, first time in the UK? How did he kind of feel when he came for the first time?
So as I said, I wasn't here when Dad came here first, but I think there wasn't much of a culture shock because he'd been in Singapore from a very young age, and you know, his work ethos is what I carried through as well, because I've been working since I was 17. You know, very strong-willed, very determined and hard worker that wanted to make his own money, and that is something that's reflected through all of us. He had friends, so they all lived in a house, you know, almost like bachelor type. I recall Dad saying that they would all draw to their strengths, and one would cook and one would clean and someone would then go and do the shopping. And there were stories about how people might have pinched someone else's food and things like that, just stories. But I think they had a very, very good time, all of them being together. And then obviously, you know, the family are back home, so I think all of those uncles that lived with my dad, their aspiration was, you know, make enough money to bring their children to the UK, obviously, you know, for a better life.
And you said that when you came with the rest of the family. How old were you when you came for the first time?
I was 7 years old. 7 years old. Until then, we lived with my grandma. A lot of memories of living in a really big house in a village, and you know, my aunties, my grandma looking after me, my sister's, you know, about 5 years older than me, so she was stepped in like a surrogate mum, I guess.
Okay, Ajisa, tell me about the times of cooking, the memories that you have of your mum cooking Indian food.
I think before we go to mum, it'd be really pointed to mention my grandma, because those tastes of how my grandma used to cook. My mum's a brilliant cook, by the way, and I'm not too bad. And but my grandma's cooking is, I can still taste the fish curry that she would make, and what we call like podichora, so that's rice wrapped in a banana leaf with a couple of like just few curries that are not runny, kind of not runny curries, and that is just yummy. And obviously, I think not everyone gets that skill. So my mum definitely picked up my grandma's cooking skills. And so when she came here, she made most of the dishes she could from back home, but using and substituting some of the vegetables with English vegetables. So rather than getting avial, which is a melody of mixed vegetables and quite a traditional Keralan dish, which I'm going to prepare later, she would perhaps make more like broccoli or carrots or beetroot. But we always ate well. And I think she had loads of friends, like I said, the uncles that lived with my dad, and then they made friends. And then they would share recipes or talk to each other about where they can get maybe an aubergine or drumsticks and things like that. So it worked well. My mum never held back on cooking. Like I said, she substituted some of the ingredients. I'll give you an example. They're always used to cooking with fresh fish. Then my mum discovered tin sardines or pilchards and thought, okay, this is another way that we can have like a fish curry, but obviously made in a different way. And then as a child, I remember us all visiting our different aunties and uncles' houses and everyone taking it in turns to cook. And as I mentioned, my mum was in Singapore from the age of 16. She was married very early. So most of our cooking has also been a fusion of Chinese, Singaporean type food, Keralan food. So for example, adding soy sauce to maybe a chicken curry, or sweet chili sauce to a fish dish. So it's a bit of a fusion, but also knowing our traditional roots of Keralan food. So mum did cook well. And then I remember the first ever Keralan shop opened up, grocery shop. And then I think mum, including all the aunties, must have been in their element. So we could then get fresh fish, imported vegetables from Kerala, and that shop did really well. So that used to be on a Saturday, we would go and get everything we needed from there. And the uncle there would ring around a few of his friends and say that they had fresh fish and things. So I think that shop was a highlight for not only my mum, I'm sure for a lot of the other aunties. And I remember going there too.
What about, British foods? Was it something that your mom would kind of cook for you, her children at home, or was it just the usual traditional foods?
We definitely had a mixture of English, Oriental and Indian food. So schools had cooking classes as well, so we had to take ingredients in for shepherd's pie or a meringue, and so we would be making that and bringing it home. So I guess school dinners formed the first part of having quite a lot of English food. So from school we'd come back and say, oh, we had beans with chips and fish fingers, and then my mum would try and replicate that. So yes, so as a child, school dinners was the first introduction to English food, and then the cooking lessons at school. So mum would have to buy the ingredients for us to make things and bring it back home. And then Saturdays we would there was only one telly, then 4 channels, so we all knew what we were watching, one after the other. And then mum would make one Saturday would be a soup, followed by like noodles, and then the Fridays was always fish fingers or the big piece of cod, and my sister would make this amazing salad that went with it. So yes, we were introduced to different flavours, and and our palate kind of grew with that, because we then had the urge to taste more. And as I said, when we went to different aunties' houses, they're cooking, and that was where my interest came from as well. Into getting to cooking, how people married up different cultures, different spices to make a tasty dish. There's no right and wrong. So yes, and then to top it all, my brother got like a Saturday job in McDonald's. So we would wait when McDonald's closed, so he'd come back with quite a lot of food. And I remember KFC buckets being quite a regular Saturday or Sunday feast as well. So we did have quite a good mixture of food.
Did you have any non-Asian people coming to your house and sharing the food with you?
Non-Asian. I'm just trying to think. We had some workers in, and Mum was making a traditional breakfast called putta. Putta is cooked in a steamed rice, and is cooked in a fan of like a long cylinder thing, and underneath you've got a steam pot. So that's how putta is made, and is layered with coconut. It's quite a dry dish, so you have to have it either with, typically with banana, or you can have like any curry with it, fish curry, chickpea curry, etc. So the workers were quite interested in what Mum was steaming up, so they wanted some. So Mum sat them down and gave it. They found it really too dry, and they tried their best to kind of like mix in the banana with it and that. So that was that. And then I remember there was a marriage. There was one of our, I think it was my sister's teacher at school. She was a Tamil lady, and we were quite close, and she married this white guy. So the tradition is that you would call a couple home, you know, after they're married. So I remember him coming and really enjoying the food. I'm sure there might have been other people at that time, but yeah, I remember those two specifically.
It must be a very kind of an experience for them, because I find the British food usually quite bland. I mean, obviously coming from France.
Yes, of course.
But when you were younger, was it a strange, you know, kind of food that you found strange when you first tried it, like in terms of British cooking?
In terms of British cooking? Not really. I did kind of had to cut up a sausage initially at school and think, what the hell was this? But I enjoyed it. No, I didn't really have an issue.
Now, as you said, do you kind of try cooking different food from different countries?
I do. I love cooking, and I like trying different foods. I like, you know, and recreating it. I can actually recreate a food and kind of tell by taste what might be in it. And I also like to look at how I can cook it. But I'm not really good at following recipes, which is why I'm not a baker. I like to experiment. I like to substitute. Because if you can work one way, then there's no reason why it can't, you know, work with another flavour. So I'm quite mixed into making things. As I mentioned to you before, I like cooking a tagine. I like cooking English food. I like our traditional Keralan food, North Indian food, Chinese, Japanese, Italian. I like all of them. So fortunately, my family are quite keen to try what I cook as well. So
what is your favourite dish?
My favourite dish, it will have to be the traditional podichoro that I mentioned earlier, which is rice, chammandi, which is coconut chutney, cabbage, fried fish, a really good omelette, and perhaps a dry potato curry, all wrapped up in a banana leaf, and left preferably for about 4 or 5 hours before you tuck in. That would be my favourite food.
In terms of cooking, for you, Ajita, what does it mean, cooking? Is it just the pleasure of cooking, sharing? So what is cooking for you?
What is cooking for me? Food is love, and I think, you know, if you prepare it from the heart, and you give it some love as you're cooking it. So you've got to want to actually cook something. You've got to think about the people that you're cooking for. And for me, it's a little bit of escapism as well. And I'm in my own element, you know, when I'm cooking. And it's also a respect to the food that we're cooking, that we handle it right, that's minimum wastage. And I like other people to try my new creations because I like creating food. And I also want people to know that it's okay, that, you know, there are easier options to cook. Sometimes when you look at recipes, it's too long, but I like to kind of show some quick, easier ways, but without cutting on the taste. So for me, yeah, food is a big integral part of the family. I always love getting my family together. We're often doing like bring a dish, or just saying to people, just come around, you know, we'll do a pot of something. And I think a lot of conversations, a lot of things are shared around food, and it's really good to keep, you know, in contact with family and friends, just to sit round the table and present something that you've cooked. And then that in itself is a good point of discussion and sharing of food. You know, so yeah, so I think I love doing that. So Kerala, God's own country, is full of coconuts and lots of dishes, and we don't just stop at rice and dal. You know, it's never a meal. We'll have a couple of vegetarian dishes that goes with it, and either a chicken curry or fish curry. So there's just loads and loads to pick from. So if we looked at traditional Keralan food, I think, and it's so difficult for me to pick, but fish curry is one of them, and I think there's about 45, 50 varieties of how you can make fish curry, fish fry. And avial that I mentioned a few times is a melody of, like, you know, mixed vegetables. Whatever you have, again, there's no right and wrong what you can put in there. So today, Samira, I'm going to cook you that. I'm going to cook a couple of varieties of fish curry, and we'll do the avial as well, and then you can get to taste that.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.